Hello and welcome. We are pleased to have you all join us today for our webinar on how to manage and inspire your team in a downturn. My name is Gina Bryant, and I am the webinar facilitator for the best and brightest companies to work for. Before we begin, I just have a few announcements. Today's broadcast is eligible for 1 hour of continuing education credit with SHRM or HRCI. In order to receive your credit, please fill out the survey from SurveyMonkey that will be emailed to you later on this afternoon. As mentioned, our broadcast today is being recorded, and we will have it available to you to view on the Best and Brightest website next week. If you have any questions during this broadcast, please use the chat feature you see in the lower left-hand portion of your screen. We will have a Q&A session at the end of this webinar. Our presenters today are Jackie Dube, Senior Vice President of Talent Optimization at the Predictive Index, and Mike Zani, CEO of the Predictive Index. Jackie has 20 years of experience in human resources, which has gained her extensive insight into HR and people management. Her current role at the Predictive Index puts her in a unique position to comment on the importance and rise of people data, the way it's being used or misused in organizations, and what companies can do to leverage this information to build a better talent strategy that aligns to the broader business strategies. Their CEO, Mike Zani, has a remarkably varied background, from coaching a U.S. Olympic sailing team to attending Harvard Business School. He helped lead a search fund to acquire companies where there was a potential to apply better management practices to improve business results. Mike and his team use the Predictive Index, a workforce assessment methodology, to ensure that they're doing the best possible job hiring and managing people. Thank you all who are joining us today. I'm going to turn the call over now to Jackie, and she will get this presentation started.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're really excited to be here today to talk about the importance of managing your teams in the current environment that we're in. I'd also like to share that Mike and I have worked together not only at the Predictive Index, but also at another organization about 10 years ago, where we used the Predictive Index as customers to build and manage a team. So we're really excited, one, to be able to share the story with you today and give you some insights as to what we've done over the last 90 days. So today we're going to talk about three main topics. Mike's going to walk us through crisis management from the top, and then realigning your strategic initiatives. And then we'll talk finally about increasing your team resilience at this time and wrap up with a question and answer session. So with that, I will hand the proverbial microphone over to Mike.
Thank you, Jackie. I do want to say before I get started that when my business partner and I sold our first company, we promised ourselves that we made the mistake of not hiring strategic HR or frankly any HR, and it was definitely a blind spot. So when we bought our second company, Shape Up, the company to which Jackie referred, Jackie was my first hire, and a day that I have never regretted. So Jackie, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you. So, COVID happened, and quite fortunately, one of our investors, growth equity firm called General Catalyst, suggested that we speak with Ken Chenault. Ken Chenault is the former CEO of American Express, sat on the board of Facebook, and currently sits on the board of Berkshire Hathaway. He's probably one of the most famous black CEOs, and just an amazing person. They suggested that we sit down with Ken and talk about managing in a crisis. And Ken knows a thing or two about managing in a crisis. If you think about American Express, he was the CEO after 9/11, and they have a huge piece of travel business at American Express, which was massively impacted by the 9/11 terrorist attacks, and again in 08 and 09 with the financial downturn. American Express obviously has a lot of exposure to finance, and he had the opportunity to manage through that crisis. And then again in 2016, being on the board of Facebook, when Facebook was really in the bright light about some of the election issues on their platform. So he is no stranger to crisis management, and as well as leading and growing high-performance organizations. So it was a real pleasure to sit down with him, and I wanted to share with you some of the lessons learned there. So his framework is so simple, and you always hear "keep it simple, stupid." He sat down and said these tenets are just so critical to what you're doing. And one, the proactivity, and you think about the COVID crisis, and more recently the social situation that we're sitting in with Black Lives Matter, but the proactivity to get your message out there quickly, and this open, honest, direct, and transparent dialogue. Your employee base, your customer base, your partner base, the media, they are much more savvy, and if you say something soft or faint or half-heartedly, they are definitely going to know. And he really stressed, this is an opportunity, and we've got many senior HR professionals here for you to articulate to your senior leadership. This is an opportunity to really build trust or lose it. And hopefully when you get this messaging together, you understand that all world-class messaging is tied back to your mission as a company to the extent that's possible. Really understanding also this empathy, compassion balance with reality during COVID-19 and the resulting sort of stoppage of work for many companies. There were some very harsh realities. And so we ourselves had a reduction of force sort of 3 weeks in to working from home, and it was 25% of the company. How do you balance the reality that we have to keep our company in business with the empathy and compassion needed for people who are really terribly impacted with furloughs and layoffs, and doing our best as a company to take care of our alumni, and also using stories as powerful tools, because these are things that are remembered and stick. A lot of the data says that really only 10% of messages are remembered by people, but the stories a much higher percentage. Getting onto his next points, really that it's important for us to share the challenges that we face, and also communicate the assumptions. And this might mean we do not know the future states, but here is what we are planning on. And if this future state is better or worse, here are the things that we're going to do about it. And it's important because your people are paying attention. They realize their jobs may be tied to this. They realize it may impact even their desire to work for this organization, and how hard they want to pull on the rope with their discretionary effort. So, making sure that we really balance and define that reality and the assumptions that underpin it. Further, I think it's about how, to the extent you can, is how you're going to emerge stronger. It's not always an easy thing to do, as some companies really were faced with the existential threat of going out of business. But emerging stronger, so that we ourselves, our mantra, you cannot impact 40 million people in the U.S. Their jobs, their livelihoods, their economic earning power, without having to reinvest in talent. So we have the confidence that we're going to emerge stronger because talent will participate. We need to repair that, and the talent will participate going forward. Every company will have their own reason and rationale for that collective emerging stronger. And clearly, if you can tie your objectives back to your big, hairy, audacious goal. And quite literally, I sat down with my business partner and these bullet points with our messaging on working from home, with our messaging about our reduction in force, with our messaging about Black Lives Matter, and putting these bullet points in front of you and say, are we meeting these criteria when we're talking about this? And it is a little bit of a cookbook, but it comes from a great leader who's seen it before, and in an effort to keep things simple. And you see the challenges that we've been hit with, coronavirus, the working from home, many of us going through a reduction of force or some impact on our workforce, and now the social situation that we're dealing with Black Lives Matter, which is rippling through our country in a way that is uncovering 400 years of not paying attention to it. So we need to prepare, because we would be foolish to think in this time that is possibly one of the most challenging times that we faced in our lifetimes, that we're not going to see further ripple effects in the next 30, 60, and 90 days. And most of our people are very brittle in terms of they're already stressed out from the things that we've gone through. So our capacity to handle these things emotionally have already been taxed. But to think of coming back to work, are we doing this reintegration into society safely? And is there going to be a vaccination? And is there going to be a second influx, likely in the fall when we start coming indoors? And then we are going to be faced with likely a very contentious, election in November. And all of these things are coming at us, and much more unknown, that we need to be prepared. And as leaders who are planning for what surely will be more waves of crisis and challenge for our people, how we can stay on top of this messaging. It's just so critically important. And with that, I'd like to hand it back over to Jackie, who's going to show us some data on and analytics on what we did to make sure we were staying on top of our people. Jackie, I think you might be muted.
Thank you. I was muted. So thanks, Mike. At the Predictive Index, coincidentally, we went fully remote on March 12th of this year, and we were just at that time closing out our annual engagement survey. At that time, as Mike mentioned, we had a lot of things to consider about our business and our workforce. And we went through a reduction in force. Our entire workforce took a salary reduction. We moved people from different jobs to different teams to different organizational units. We shifted our strategy. Mike will talk through that a little bit later, from a very aggressive go-to-market strategy to a more internal focus on product and client. And then, as with most companies, we went 100% remote. And so while we had this result of our engagement survey in March, we knew that all of this change was going to, one, challenge our leadership, but two, have an effect on everything that we had just measured. So we communicated the changes or the results of the survey to our employees, and then committed to reassessing where we were in June. And so we just closed that survey out. We're going to share the results, the comparative results with you before we've shared them with our workforce. We've let them know that we're doing this, but so these are hot off the press. And you'll see that once we went remote, we were really focused on three things, well, on many things, but we knew that we had high engagement by our employees. We knew that our employees were working well with their managers. They were getting the coaching and development that they needed, and that organizationally our culture was strong. The belief in our leadership and the trust in our leadership was really strong, and we needed to maintain that. And so we did a lot of things to ensure as Mike had just talked about, that him and his business partner had gone through to ensure that we maintained all of these things. And there was consistent communication from leadership, from Mike and his business partner. It was real. We wanted our employees to understand and know that we understood how difficult the transition to remote work was. So Mike actually sent a company update on his Peloton to let everyone know, like, it's okay to take a break. We had, and we continue to have, weekly town hall meetings where employees get to ask anonymously any questions they want around, at the time it was our reduction in force, whether it's we're going back to the office and when are we getting our salaries back, what are we responding to the social situation with Black Lives Matter, to product questions. So we have an opportunity to talk to employees every single week. We're super transparent about changes that we're making and direct. We also really wanted to make sure that we were checking in with all of our employees. So we enacted a buddy system, so employees would have check-ins with their managers, but we also asked our employees to check in with each other and for everyone to make sure that they were, had a buddy that they were checking in on every single day. And then we led with empathy. And so as I mentioned, we just received the results of this survey, and we were very pleased to see that all of the efforts really were able to maintain and continue within our organization through all of this change and crisis. We realize now is that we do have a pretty big area to work on, which is how our employees are working day to day. And we'll go into this in a little bit more detail in just a second. But really around the job and roles and responsibilities and how our teams realigned and decisions being made. And so we've taken a deeper dive into that. So here's just another view. Our engagement survey gives us, as an organization, what our strengths and blind spots are. And in summary, you can see that our similar favorable results were that our organization is stronger because of its culture. And then our blind spots. And our blind spots, again, they're all about the job and how are people managing their day-to-day with all of this change and reorganization. We actually just had a session with one of the folks on our science team yesterday to really help us evaluate and deep dive how to address some of these areas. And if you look at job satisfaction and all the things that go into that, we can easily see that if you look to the middle of the screen, one of our lowest scores is around processes and procedures. And we understand that that we're going to talk about the type of organization that we were pre-COVID, but we're a pretty fast-moving company, and we definitely experience a lot of change. But our processes and procedures are obstacles, and we're not sure if this is because there's too many or not enough. And so we're going to take some time to really work with one of our consulting partners to help us take action on increasing job satisfaction across the organization. And then here you see just the organization scores of really high scores after all of this change, after reduction in force, after asking employees to do the same amount of work with less pay. But our employees really still believe that the organization is strong, they believe in the leadership, and they trust the organization. So we're really happy about that. And lastly, I just want to talk about the importance of fostering community. We have a management team stand up every single morning, and we actually have more fun than this picture presents. And we talk about work every single morning, keep each other updated and aligned so that everyone's moving in the same direction, but we also keep it very light and fun. And on Fridays we have Fun Fact Friday. We've talked about our favorite birthday party. I can't remember what the last one was, Mike. Maybe you will. But it's really important to stay connected in any way that you can as a team to keep people feeling good and understand what's going on in your organization. And with that, I'll hand it over to Mike to take on our next section around realigning your strategic initiatives.
Yeah, Jackie, it was pull up the last photo in your phone and describe what it was for and what it was meant to convey. So that was risky, but it worked well. So with all of this change, obviously the economy changed, 25% reduction in force. We did a reorg around that. We had to do less with more. We had to say no to things. We knew that there was a huge realignment of strategic initiatives. And as Jackie pointed out, we went from a very aggressive, external-facing, growth-minded stance to more of a preservation, internally focused stance with our clients of how can we help. So this realignment on strategic initiatives was imperative. One of our rock star strategic employees found a study done by McKinsey & Company. And if you don't know McKinsey & Company, they're one of the preeminent strategy consulting firms in the world. And you can see they put together this 3x3 matrix. And I'll do a little setup here. On the vertical axis, you have effectiveness of the public health response. So on the bottom, ineffective, the middle, moderately effective, on the top, very effective. And on the horizontal axis, you have the effectiveness of the government economic policy at stemming the tide of this recession. Again, on the left, ineffective, in the middle, moderately effective, and then on the right, very effective. So, McKinsey came up with this 9-buck strategy. We really didn't have the time to go through all 9 boxes, so our management team said, hey, we don't believe it's going to be good or good. So we got rid of the entire top or right rows and said, we'll just focus on the medium or the bad case, these 4 in the blue box. And the reason we did that was most of us thought that's what was going to happen. And we wanted to really focus on those 4 scenarios. So what we did is we said, okay, let's go through these 4 scenarios and let's select a time frame in which to discuss them. Let's ask each other, the whole senior management team, what are the likelihood of each outcome? And let's do some deep dives on each scenario. And we did just that. We ended up looking at these time frames, and you'll notice that at 6 months, there's almost no difference. You can't really tell. Whereas as you roll forward 12, then 18, and then 24 months, somewhere between 18 or 24 months, you can say, which trajectory are we on? And you can see here scenario 1, okay virus, but bad economy. Scenario 2, okay virus, okay economy. Scenario 3, bad virus, bad economy. And scenario 4, bad virus, okay economy. So the reason we did this is it's so easy to talk past each other with the senior management team that someone thinks we're going to be fine and someone thinks we're facing virtual Armageddon. And it's so easy to talk past each other. If you anchor on one of these scenarios, it makes it a lot more difficult to talk past each other. And what we ended up doing was we recommend to you 18 to 24-month time frame. We did a little bit of a poll. We used software called Menti, which you don't have to use Menti, but we did the poll, and it turns out that the majority of us thought it was going to be either scenario 1 or scenario 4. Now, just to click back a second, scenario 1, these were both the middle cases. One was because it was an okay virus, bad economy. The other one was bad virus, okay economy. But most of us thought it was going to be a middle case, not a good case and not the worst case. And then what we did is we ended up we took a portfolio of all of our strategic actions. That was about 15 to 20 things that we were going to do over the next 18 to 24 months. And we wanted to put them into 3 buckets. The first bucket was no regret move, which is when you do this, it's going to pay off in almost any scenario. The middle bucket, options, that it was a significant positive payoff in most of the outcomes, but when it was a negative effect, it was in the smaller camp. Whereas the big bets were they might have been good in some, but if they didn't work, they were really going to have a negative impact in other scenarios. So we took all of our strategic initiatives, like I said, 15 to 20, and we ended up mapping them. Now, what you're seeing here is what's called a Miro board, but in the software Miro, we pre-populated the 20 outcomes for each scenario. And you can see across the top scenario 1, scenario 2, scenario 3, scenario 4. And what we did is we mapped out the activities. In that scenario, is it a big bet, is it an option, or is it a no regret, move? And we went through that, and we took the entire senior management team, and we parsed them into, there was 8 people. We went 2 by 2 to cover a scenario, putting those initiatives into those boxes. Because what we wanted to do is come up with this portfolio of action. What's the likelihood of that scenario? What are the actions that we should take in that scenario? How will our capital plan change or our financing plan change with that scenario? And what are the internal and external indicators which are letting us know that we are in or not in that scenario? And we went through this exercise as a senior team. And as you can imagine, doing strategy while remotely working in times of stress will sometimes give you, headaches or frustrations. But we managed through that using tools like Miro and Menti, and as Jackie said, really trying to keep it light when we can, to make sure that our senior team was as aligned as possible on what those strategic outcomes were and what things that we should be doing in each one. And it turned out that we did not have huge differences, but now we were aligned, and now we weren't talking past each other, and now we could actually talk about scenarios that like today, just 3 weeks later, it seems like the economy is going a little better than we thought, and possibly the economic interventions are in fact working. So it gives us insight into where we might be in each of these scenarios. So with all of that change in strategy, we had to say to ourselves, how is that going to impact our team, and how can the team be more resilient in that environment? And the risk here is most groups that are comfortable working together will tend to overuse their strengths. Now with us, we have a very aggressive, assertive, risk-tolerant team, which means in a time of crisis, we might tend to innovate our way out of a crisis. And if we went to one of our greatest strengths, innovation and risk tolerance and big ideas, that is probably the wrong thing to do. Like I said, we were a more internal, more conservative, more how can we help stance as opposed to pre-COVID. So we needed to make sure that we aligned our talent around these new priorities, and make sure that we really could unstick the team because people will struggle to work out of their preferences. So there's a tool that we'd like to share with you, which will help you do this. And when I introduce the tool, I'll then hand it back over to Jackie in a second to show you the specific details. The tool is called the Competing Values Framework. It is a very simple strategic roadmap, which gives you 4 main strategic buckets. And I'll share that with you. The upper right is your exploring category. Think of companies like Airbnb and Uber. These are companies that are breaking the mold. They're not just better, they're fundamentally different. They're trying to invent things that are new to the market. Think Tesla, think SpaceX. And these exploring strategies are high risk, high reward. In the next bucket, producing, the bottom right, these are industries and strategies where you are trying to compete with market share and you're using metrics and KPIs to beat your competition and outflank your competition. Think of things like the auto industry where you're competing on miles per gallon, or you're competing on cost, or you're competing on other features. For a while with minivans, it was number of cup holders, but you're competing on some known basis of competition. In the lower left, the stabilizing quadrant, think of banks and hospitals, most manufacturing floors. This is about improving efficiency and predictability, and this is about doing things right consistently. In the last quadrant, cultivating. This is really rallying people around the commitment and the big mission. These are your mission-driven organizations. Not surprisingly, you see a lot of not-for-profits here. You see, amazingly, you see a lot of sports teams here, where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And you actually see a lot of educational institutions in this cultivating, quadrant. So these are the 4 quadrants of the competing values framework. And I will pass it over to Jackie to let us walk through.
Great, thanks, Mike. So as Mike mentioned, our executive team and our company is in the exploring quadrant. Pre-COVID, we were really focusing on our go-to-market strategy. We're producing a lot of new product, and our team moved very fast with lots of innovative, risk-taking thinkers. And during that time, all of that worked really well for us. We were able to exchange ideas quickly. We solved problems. Like Mike had mentioned, we solved problems through innovation, and we moved really fast. And it was part of our culture. And when you think about, managing in crisis, if you rely on those strengths, you can exhaust your team if you're not thoughtful and aware about it. And, I think that for us, we knew that we had to keep the team aligned, so we shifted our strategy very quickly. We created 3 new goals that we had to rally the company behind. When we aligned our entire company around a persona. So we said to our employees that if you are not working on one of the 3 main goals or moving along the persona for our product, you should be asking yourself, why are you doing that activity, and make sure that you're not just working, but you're productive. And that really prevented us from exhausting our employees. And some of the things that we really employed to ensure that we were not using the same tactics that were very successful in a different environment for our team was our management team got together and said, okay, in this new environment, what do we need to start doing? What do we need to stop doing? And what do we need to keep doing? And a lot of those things came up as, making sure when decisions are made that you're communicating them, that everyone has a voice that's a key stakeholder in that decision. And mostly that we had to really prioritize what we were working on, focus our employees on working on those things, and come to the realization that we cannot do everything. And having that session, we actually used Miro for that session also, really held us accountable to ensuring that we were living up to these new operating procedures. And I've seen it play out in our management meetings where we say no and everyone feels accountable to each other to ensure that we're prioritizing work on behalf of our teams. And so with that, I would love to conclude the content portion of the session and move to questions and answers.
Okay, if anyone out there has any questions, looks like we just got one in. The first question is, conflict is inevitable in times of high stress. What support are you providing to managers to ensure that teams are working together effectively?
Sure. So I can start that, and Mike, feel free to add in. And so for managers, like I said, we are employing stand-ups. we are giving employees the room to take breaks. In fact, we had a company standard calendar process where we had no meeting blocks. So during the hours of 10 to 10:30, 12 to 1, and 2:30 to 3, no one in the company is allowed to schedule a meeting. This gives employees time to manage their, whether it's their family, their home, take a walk for the dog, take a break from Zoom, whatever it may be. So really giving them that time without the guilt to help themselves just manage their time. Anything to add, Mike?
Yeah, one of the things that we did do for all of our managers is, since we did a reduction in force and since we did a reorg, was really look at the makeup of the team. One of our big sort of mandates is, don't manage people the way that you yourself want to manage. You really need to modify yourself and manage your team the way they need to be managed. So giving the tools to your people, your key managers, to make sure that they know how to modify themselves. If, as an example, if Jackie were more introverted, which she's not, but if she were, there are things that I could do to give her more private praise, give her time to think about an agenda for the next meeting, give her time to think through a response. Really, the onus is on so many of your managers. And interestingly, most of us undertrain our managers. Managers get to that spot. They might manage a process, and then we give them a resource, and they go from one resource to two, and then the next thing you know, they're a manager of people, and they may have no training other than saying, I had a good manager once, maybe I'll manage like them. So we really do spend some time there.
Okay, thank you.
It looks like the next question. Oh, did you want to read through that, Gina?
Oh, sure. What's your stance on pivoting the business too often to meet market conditions? I struggle with being an agile business versus being a business that creates too much change for my employees.
Wow, Shirley, that's that is a tough question. Certainly, I think when the environment is changing as much as it has in the last 60 to 90 days, which are existential threats to businesses, business closures, going out of business at a pace we've really never seen. That you could make the argument that no change is too small in order to survive. You sort of survive and deal with the outcomes. I think your question becomes a little more challenging as the changes may not be as drastic in say the 90 days looking forward. Still big, but not as drastic. How do you make sure that you're not whipsawing your employees? And great question. I think, like Jackie showed with the, an engagement survey, which just was 90 days after the last one. We don't recommend that companies do engagement surveys that frequently, unless they are willing to act on the data. But we're glad we did in this case, because we now feel that we have our thumbprint or our thumb on the pulse of the people, so that we can say, can we change right now, or is this change going to be too much? And I think the more you're on top of where your people are at, you'll realize, are they capable of making the change you're contemplating? So that may not have nailed it, but I hope it gave some insight. Thank you, Shirley.
Okay, we have another question. What do you think employees have benefited from the most in regards to additional support that you have provided during this time?
Yes, so I think, as Mike had spoken to about really meeting your employees where they're at, while we've always been a very employee-centric, caring company, I do believe the focus on communication, on transparency, on really renewed focus on decision making, and by slowing our pace down a little bit, they've really taken the journey in a much more intentional way. And so I really feel that while there has been a strategic shift, that employees have benefited from the constant communication about why, what we're doing, and where we're going. And so hopefully when we reassess our employees, that their jobs will feel, that they understand how to do their day-to-day better.
Yeah, and further to that, Jack, I agree with that wholeheartely. I also think that we are really asking people to take care of themselves. And we have an unlimited PTO policy, which ironically people don't take massive amounts of extra PTO when you do that. But we are really ensuring that people take some PTO. And people are reluctant to. We just did a reduction in force. They don't want to take time off because they're like, well, what if there's another one and I don't want them to think I'm not working really hard? And we're begging them to take time off and look out for themselves. And if they have 2 hours on a Friday or an afternoon that they want to log out early, that's okay. We need to take care of ourselves in this time because we really do believe that mental health, stress, trauma, PTSD symptoms are going to pop up because we're just going into I think people are beyond maxing. Many are done.
Okay, Mike, another question came through. How are you able to offer your process during COVID-19? Are you working virtually with your clients?
Judy, that's a good question. We offer our predictive index services through a network of certified partners. So we're already very distributed, where we have 450 partners all over the globe. They represent us. They do consulting and services on top of the software platform and intellectual property we build. But we're in communication with them all the time. We are doing weekly webinars with them and really helping them with things like when they used to do in-person training, we quickly rolled out virtual training, and we're sharing with them and giving them tools to help serve their clients. And as clients start picking their heads up, we are seeing the training and workshops and facilitation numbers and go through, their hockey sticking up again. People are starting to reinvest. And we do believe that this new normal, which maybe is an overused term, I think virtual type things like we're doing here today, where you learn, you get to ask questions, we're just on the front end of this. And while some of us may be very sick of all the Zoom calls, I know I get that way sometimes, I've also seen incredibly innovative speakers and ways of communicating and sharing while remote. And I think we'll look back in a year and a half from now and say, wow, we just did 5 years of development in 18 months to get better at doing this remote thing.
I don't see any other questions.
Yeah, Gina, it looks like we're coming to an end. For all of you who took the time, thank you for investing in in talent and crisis management. It's so important to do right by our most important asset, our people, and we are thrilled to share this time with you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Jackie, for taking this time out for us. As a reminder, if you do need your continuing education credits, please fill out the survey. They will be emailed to you. It's coming from SurveyMonkey this afternoon. Today's webinar was recorded. We will get that posted on our Best and Brightest website so that you can look through the slide presentation. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you again, Jackie and Mike. I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon. Be safe and stay healthy.